Welcome back to Mormon Deep Dive, your channel for exploring the history, beliefs, money, and power of the Mormon Church, and the hidden stories they might not want you to know. Have you ever wondered what happens when a prophet's divine translation is put to the ultimate test? In 1835, Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, acquired a set of ancient Egyptian papyri. He declared them to be the writings of the biblical patriarch Abraham, written by his own hand. He then produced a scripture from them called the Book of Abraham, a foundational text of the Mormon faith, still printed in their canon today. But what if I told you that modern science could verify Smith's translation? Imagine having the original document, the Rosetta Stone of Mormonism, right in front of you. Would you dare to look? Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode where we uncover the truth. So, Joseph Smith claimed to translate these ancient Egyptian texts through divine power. The resulting Book of Abraham tells a grand story of Abraham's life in Egypt, his knowledge of astronomy, and a premortal existence. For over a century, the original papyri were thought to be lost, destroyed in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Believers had to rely on faith alone. The only evidence was the printed text and the facsimiles, the drawings from the papyri published alongside the scripture. But then, the unthinkable happened. In 1966, a portion of the original papyri that Joseph Smith used for his translation were rediscovered in the archives of the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was a stunning development. The church quickly acquired them, and for the first time, both Mormon and non-Mormon Egyptologists had access to the very source material for the Book of Abraham. This was the moment of truth. The world held its breath. Would these ancient scrolls confirm Joseph Smith's status as a prophet, or would they reveal something else entirely? Leading Egyptologists, people like Klaus Baer from the University of Chicago and Richard Parker from Brown University, both renowned in their field, examined the fragments. Their conclusions were unanimous and definitive. And here's the sudden twist in our story. The papyri were not the writings of Abraham, not even close. They were identified as common Egyptian funerary texts, specifically parts of the Book of the Dead and the Book of Breathings. These were standard documents placed with the deceased to guide them in the afterlife. The main fragment, which Smith had directly linked to his translation of Abraham, was a funerary text for a man named Hor. Yes, a priest named Hor, who lived around the 1st century BC, 2,000 years after Abraham. So, what about the illustrations? Joseph Smith interpreted facsimile, no. One, as Abraham being sacrificed on an altar by an idolatrous priest. Egyptologists identified it as a typical scene showing the god Anubis embalming the deceased person. In this case, Hor. Smith claimed facsimile, no. 3 depicted Abraham teaching astronomy. The experts saw it as the deceased Hor being brought before the god Osiris in the afterlife. The discrepancies were staggering. A story of a biblical prophet versus a standard pagan burial manual. Let me ask you this. If you discovered that a sacred text was based on a complete mistranslation, how would that affect your faith? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, you might be thinking, how did the LDS Church respond to this damning evidence? Well, this is where it gets even more fascinating. For years, the official line was one of deflection. But eventually, the evidence became too overwhelming to ignore. In 2014, the church published an essay on its own website titled Translation and Historicity of the Book of Abraham, and in it, they made a shocking admission. They openly stated, and I quote, "None of the characters on the papyrus fragments mentioned Abraham's name or any of the events recorded in the Book of Abraham." They conceded that the documents were indeed common Egyptian funerary texts. So, case closed, right? A fraud exposed? Well, not exactly. The church pivoted. They introduced a new explanation called the catalyst theory. The argument now is that the papyri didn't actually contain the words of Abraham, but instead, they acted as a sort of spiritual catalyst. They believe looking at these Egyptian texts opened a channel of divine revelation for Joseph Smith, allowing him to receive the story of Abraham directly from God, completely independent of what was actually written on the papyrus. This raises a critical question, and I'd love to see your answers in the comments. If the text on the papyri is irrelevant, why did Joseph Smith claim he was translating the characters on them? He even created an Egyptian alphabet and grammar, linking specific symbols to specific English sentences. Was he mistaken about his own process, or was something else going on? For many in Europe, where historical criticism and scientific evidence are highly valued, this story is particularly striking. It presents a clear conflict between religious claims and verifiable academic consensus. The catalyst theory might satisfy some believers, but for critics, it looks like a desperate attempt to move the goalposts after the original claim was proven false. It's an example of how faith-based organizations adapt their narratives when confronted with inconvenient facts. The story of the Book of Abraham is not just a historical curiosity. It strikes at the very heart of the foundational claims of Mormonism and Joseph Smith's role as a prophet. It forces a conversation about the nature of faith, evidence, and truth. If the translation of these papyri was not what it was claimed to be, what does that imply about the other translations and revelations that form the basis of the entire religion? This is the kind of deep dive we do here. We look at the evidence, we examine the claims, and we let you draw your own conclusions. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of Mormonism's most controversial topics. If you found this informative and want to explore more hidden stories, make sure you're subscribed to Mormon Deep Dive and ring that notification bell. Please leave a comment with your thoughts on the questions I asked. We read them all. Until next time, keep questioning.